Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tara Gujjar. I'm the co-founder and co-director of the Traditional Arts and Ethnology Center. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to our fourth TAC talk. We're very pleased to be welcoming back into the fold Dr. Marie-Pierre Lissoir, an old staff member of TAC. She will be giving a talk entitled Stories from the Field, Exploring Ethics, Connection, and Power Imbalance of Research in Laos. Thank you very much to all of you for attending on this Sunday. It's very rainy here in Luang Prabang this afternoon. And I know some of you may be joining from Europe where it's morning. Thank you, especially to those of you who made a donation that really goes to help TAC's activities and work. Excuse me, I'm sure you can hear my children fighting in the background. So for those of you who don't know much about TAC, let me tell you a little bit about us. We are a cultural heritage social enterprise. Sorry, just a second. Can you go to the other room? We are a cultural heritage social enterprise based here in Luang Prabang in Northern Laos. We run a museum. We have handicraft and livelihoods programs, advocacy activities, and we perform research and try to disseminate it as much as we can, such as through talks like this and through our exhibitions. We do have a website, a Facebook page, a newsletter where we'll be announcing future talks and where you can learn more about the work that we do. So please follow us if you'd like to remain updated. Just a quick note, we are recording this talk and we will be sharing the recording with you all by email after the talk is finished. I now want to introduce Dr. Marie-Pierre Lissoir. Marie-Pierre is from a farm originally in Belgium. Her parents still run a working farm. But Marie-Pierre went in a different direction and she pursued 2 master's degrees, one in musicology and one in anthropology. And she first came to Laos in 2008 to research the traditional singing of the Tai Dam ethnic group. And she ultimately focused her PhD, which was entitled the Khap Tai Dam, Categorisation and Musical Models, Ethnomusicology Studies among the Dai in the Highlands of Laos. And she achieved this PhD in 2016. Marie-Pierre worked for TAC as a researcher and curator from 2015 and did many field trips with us and for us during her 6 years that she worked for TAC, from the very north in Phong Sa Ly province down to the south in Sekong, on everything from music to textile traditions to intangible cultural heritage. However, one of the best things about Marie-Pierre, I would say, is how flexible she was. I mean, despite having a PhD and being a researcher and musicologist, she was great at being a guide and a speaker in our museum, selling handicrafts in our shop, and doing photography. So she was very, very multi-talented and very broad in her skill set. She did leave TAC in Laos in 2021, and she is now based in Qatar, where she's an interpretive specialist in the exhibition center section, excuse me, of the National Museum of Qatar. So, Marie-Pierre, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you, Tara. I will share my screen now. All right. Can you see the screen? Can you hear me well?
Yes, it's great. Perfect.
Okay, great. Perfect. Then I'm going to start. So thank you everyone for joining us today for this talk. Thank you so much, Tara, for this very nice introduction, and thank you TAC for having me today. So today I wanted to explore issues of ethics, connection between people, power, balance and imbalance through example and specific case studies that occurred during my research in Laos between 2008 and 2020. So as Tara explained in her introduction, I have a background in both anthropology and ethnomusicology. So for those of you who are not familiar with this discipline, cultural and social anthropology, to summarize very simply, it's the study of human, of society, so the interaction between people. And ethnomusicology is also part of social sciences, and it's a discipline that explores the relation between people and music. Why do people do music, what it means to them, how it shows their identity, etc. And the really core of this discipline is really the field trip, or so the research trip. It's the researcher going into a community to do survey, recording, etc. So you can see on the right this very nice illustration by Gary Larson that shows kind of the cliche of the anthropologists or even the ethnomusicologists going on the field, although some people still view it like that, and maybe some researcher also who have the impression they will arrive into this exotic community with, quote, authentic people without any modern technology, which is absolutely not the case. And you can indeed do research in far away from your home and your culture. For example, I did research in Laos, and I'm from Belgium, but you could also do anthropology at home. You can do an ethnomusicological research on the choir on the church next to your house, for example, or studying a conductor working with an orchestra. So all of this is possible. What it makes ethnomusicology what it is more not really the topic, but more the methodology. And the field work is one very big part of it, as well as the participative observation. So during field trip, in the case of my own field trip in Laos, I had the chance to visit several regions of the country. During the research, I was always with a colleague. Here it is Ton, or Captain Suanalit from TAEC. He's discussing with a musician, because we were looking for specific instrument for the music exhibition. So he's showing picture of the instrument we are looking for. So we are doing this interview, we are doing survey. Of course, we are also doing recordings and video and audio recordings, as well as pictures. And we also share, when possible, life of the community, so daily chores, celebration, and everyday life, meal, etc. So for this talk, I'm going to use example in the 4 of the main field trip that I was lucky enough to do in Laos. The first one are the field trip I did for my PhD on the Khap singing of Tai Dam ethnic group in Hua-Pan province, so in the Tai Dam community. The second are all the field trip I did with TAEC in the north of Laos to prepare and research for the Voices of the Wind music exhibition. Then I will also take example from the field trip we did in the Oma community. We went there with TAEC both for the music exhibition, but also for research on intellectual property rights. And also a very nice field trip in the south of Laos, again with TAEC, when we did cultural practice survey in Katu and Talieng communities. So the first thing that you do as a researcher when you arrive somewhere for a field trip, whether it's in a suburb of London or in a village of Laos, is of course connecting with the community. So spoken exchanges obviously are the easiest and the most direct way to connect with people. Although personally, I always did my field trip either with a colleague who's a Lao native speaker or with an interpreter. I speak Lao language, which is the national language in Laos, fairly well, but not well enough to do very subtle interview and very deep conversation. So I always had to do some teamwork, really. And So speaking with people was, of course, an option that I did, but it was not the only way for me to connect. Also, living in the community, as I explained, is a very nice way to connect with everyone. But one of the method that was the most important, I would say, in my own field trip was the identification, understanding, and respecting unspoken social convention. For example, the way to dress up is always really appreciated if you respect the etiquette, consumption of food and beverage, and of course, the spatial hierarchy and the way to move into this specific social space. Food consumption, of course, meal is a very important moment in pretty much every culture of the world. It is a moment of a communal reunion. The community is gathering around the meal. You also have gender differences in many of the villages when we work. Most of the time, women would eat together and men in another group. And these were really interesting moments, of course, to connect with our informant and have more informal discussion with them. Of course, also alcohol consumption in Laos, in I would say all the village in which I've been, was a very important thing, also a way to connect with people. Here it's Lao Hai drinking in the Khmu village for a Khmu New Year in Luang Prabang. This is a jar alcohol that you drink with a straw, and it has a very specific way to be consumed because you do this as a team. So you have at least one other person with you, and a third person is pouring water into the jar, and the two person drinking have to drink as much as possible so that the water doesn't come out of the jar. If it does, it's a really bad thing. So it's like a team effort to drink together, and it really creates a special bond between the two person drinking together. You also have another kind of alcohol very popular in Laos. It's the Lao Lao. It's also a rice alcohol. Here it's we've done in the Oma village with Ai Khampeng, the head of the village. And personally, I also had, I must say, a lot of drinking during my field trip for my PhD on the Khap Tai Dam. I even wrote an article about it. You can find this on my academia profile. So when I did my PhD, it was about the traditional singing of the Tai Dam. So the Khap Tai Dam is performed in a festive context. A festive context, well, of course, in which you have alcohol all the time. Performers with who I work were not professional singers. They were just normal people who were particularly good at singing. And they were doing that during very informal meals, celebration during New Year, for example. So people were a bit shy to start performing, and it was really normal to give them some alcohol to give them some courage and also some inspiration, because the Khap Tai Dam is partially improvised. So it was a very important element for the singers and of course also for the guests, and particularly for me as an outsider from the community. I was kind of a guest of honor and had a very special part of drinks. I had always the bigger glass. It was very important for my host, for me to participate and also drink every time the other members were drinking. And to be honest, at the first time, even if it can look really funny, but at first it was quite hard for me, and I was very passive in my alcohol consumption during field trips for my PhD. I was drinking because I realized it was really important socially, and that the person with who I was working, it was a nice way for me to show that I was involved in the community. But I was just drinking when the glass were given to me, and that's it. And it was only, I would say, at the middle of my field trips. So I did 3 years of field trip with 6 months in each of the year of field trip. And it's at the half of the field trip that actually my interpreter is Ampon. You can see him on the image on the right. Suggested to me that I serve the alcohol myself sometimes. And I start doing that. So one day I asked my host, Pong Sikeo, if it was okay that I serve the Lao Lao. So I took the bottle, and I respect the etiquette of serving the alcohol, which is you take the bottle, you have the glass in your left hand, you pour the glass for yourself first, show to everyone that you have alcohol in your glass, wish good things to everyone, drink, and then serve the next person on the left, and so on. And Ponsikeo was actually extremely moved that I served the alcohol, and he said, wow, this is the first time Marie is serving us alcohol. I'm so happy. And at that moment, really, I understood how important my participation and my active participation in this side of the communal life was important. And I really started being more active at that moment. I was able to really master all the little tricks, all the etiquette to avoid drinking alcohol. So you cannot say no to a drink, but you can actually use these little tricks. For example, asking your neighbor to drink half of your glass. You can say, oh, please, solidarity, and you pour half of your glass into your neighbor glass. You can also spit a little bit of alcohol on the floor, saying it's for the spirits. So the mastering of all of these etiquettes starting to be very useful for me, a way to connect really with people in the community. And at the end, I had a very active use of alcohol by bringing the bottle myself when we had celebration. I started singing also a little bit of Khap Tai Dam, and did ask a few times to have a drink or two before singing, because indeed it gives you courage. And something really interesting in that I saw with my the evolution of my mastering of the etiquette, I would say that I also start moving spatially. So this is a very traditional space in which you would have a festive meal in the Tai Dam community. So everybody's eating on the floor. You have the men on one side and the women on the other. And when I started working in the community, I was actually first sitting on the men's side, the elder of the village, so really the more important people, because I was a guest. But little by little, I started being moved from the men's side to first the in-between men and women, elder men and elder women, and then being more and more in between the women side, which was really showing that little by little I was going from the status of a guest to one of a daughter of the community. Another important use of etiquette and understanding of the social space was when I was going to the Buddhist temple in Luang Prabang. So that was for my personal life. It was not for field trip, but I think it's a nice example as well. So I was going to here it's Wat Papai in Luang Prabang. I was going quite often, sometime once every day for the 6 p.m. Chanting and meditation. The temple is open to everyone, of course. And I was going with one of my friends, also a Westerner, and little by little we started mastering by observing and of course also asking questions, but mostly observing and living in the temple, seeing the different use of the space and how to respect this etiquette that no one really explained to us. And so in the space of the temple, first you have the altar, which is the sacred space of the temple. You can see here at the end of the picture, it's the altar with the main Buddha statue. You have a lot of other statues that are offering from the community. Then you have incense, some picture, candle, etc. So that's the most sacred part of the temple, of course. Then next to the altar, you have the monks and the statue of the temple, so the highest member of the Sangha. And behind them, you have the young novices. So novices are under 18. Many of them are young kids from the village who come and stay for a few years in the temple. And when they are 18 and they finish studying, most of them will go back to lay life and some will become monks. Then you have the laymen. You can see that there are only a few of them in the temple because Buddhist men usually are either novices or monks a few times, at least once in their life. So they kind of already fulfill their Buddhist duty, I would say. So that's why they are less numerous in the temple than the women. Then you have the nuns. In this case, there are temporary nuns. So nuns, lay women that are nuns for a few days or a few weeks during a specific time of the year, for example, Buddhist Lent. If they were long-time or full-time nuns, I would think there would be before the men, the laymen actually. Then you have the lay woman and then the foreign woman. Foreign women, not so much because they are foreigner, but more because, of course, well, they are outsider and they don't master the etiquettes of the temple so much. So most of the time they would be at the end. And really, I saw with time, and for me to master this use of the spaces and this horizontal hierarchy in the space, that I was more and more often invited by the elder ladies of the temple to join them closer to the altar in this space where the nuns and the lay women are sitting. So next to connecting with people through, well, discussion and sharing everyday life and drinking, food, etc. Of course, you also have what we call participative observation. So not just being passive and observing, but also participating in a specific aspect of the life and of the research. And in my case, of course, it was by performing music and dance. So this is Oma New Year in Phongsali province. So every year there are a few days of celebration, and the men of the village build this this Ferris wheel that lasts just a few days, and you have people gathering around to sing and dance and drink and eat together. And it's a very nice moment, and it's kind of what marks the start of the celebration for the Oma New Year. And this is something I also was lucky enough to try. I was pushed by the friend of the village. They told me, yeah, please, Marie-Pierre, try. And I was with my colleague, Ton, who also pushed me to try the wheel. And I said, are you sure it's strong enough to support me? He said, yes, sure, go try out. So I went, I did a few spins. It was really nice, a little bit scary, to be honest, but I had a good time. And then after I went down, I asked my colleague, Ton, don't you want to try it as well? And he said, oh, no, I have children. So in the end, I'm the only one who tried, but it was a very nice experience. And during field trip in the Oma village, I also did a few singing performances. I'm not a professional singer, but play music and I sing. So here you see one example of me singing in the village during New Year. It was a little bit embarrassing, but I thought that I am asking everyone to sing and I'm recording people. So I think it is fair that I also perform when people ask me to. And actually, this experience is really helped me to understand kind of a mystery that ran all through my PhD field trip and that took me years to understand. It's this lady that you can see on the right. So this is a picture that I took during my field trip in Tai Dam villages for my PhD. And you always have, when you have a formal performances, so not people singing around the meal with a drink and with friends, that is different. But the more formal setting with a microphone, a stage, a musician, etc. Then all the time, every time someone is performing, you would have a lady standing next to her and doing nothing. This is other example in other setting, other villages. You have one singer and her friends standing next to them, and you can see also the example on the right. It's similar. And so I always wonder why they were there. First, I always thought, okay, maybe they will sing a song afterward, but actually they don't, and they are just standing there. And this is also something that I noticed into the Oma community when we did research there. So here you have Metal Van, who is singing, and other friends who are just standing next to them. So for Oma New Year, you have this Ferris wheel that is built, and then just next to the Ferris wheel, you have piece of land that is cleared to have some celebration. And so you have some dancing and music. So here in terms of use also of the space is really interesting because you see that the women in traditional outfits are dancing first. Then you have this young lady who's doing the transition. She has a Lao scene, so that is more considered as more modern and related to the majority group. And then the top that is Oma, and then the younger girls who are wearing Lao outfits. You have also the men that dance. And then you also have other kind of celebration just after that. And so after all of these dances, I've been asked to perform in front of everyone. I was quite embarrassed, to be honest, because I have been pushed in the middle of this place under the spotlight. Someone handed me a microphone and say, okay, now sing. And they asked me to sing a Khap Tai Dam, which I did in a terrible Tai Dam kind of, yogurt kind of singing, and also a Belgian song. So I didn't know any by heart, so I ended up singing a Celtic song. And before starting singing, Metan Van came next to me. I thought first that she was asking me, she wanted to ask me something, or maybe she would sing with me, but actually she just stood by me during the whole time I was singing. And then when I was done, we went back together and joined the others. And this is really when I deeply understood why these ladies were standing next to the performer in a more formal context. It's so that you're not alone. You're not alone under the spotlight. You're not alone and scared in front of everyone. And in Laos, it is a very important thing. The group, the community is key. No one is really ever alone in these communities. People don't stay alone in their house. They don't sleep alone. They don't live alone in the village. People who are isolating themselves from the community, and I met a few one I really consider as outsider, and the community doesn't understand why some people would want to be outside of the group. So this is really something I understood by performing during New Year, and it has been confirmed again with the OMA when some of members of that village were invited to TAEC. We were working on the question of intellectual property rights protection, and we hired a professional crew to make videos and interview of the OMA about that topic. And we asked one of them, I think it was Sivon, to do the interview. And at that moment, she was in front of the camera and she asked someone else to stand next to her so that she would not be alone in front of the camera. And then we had all of this discussion about not being alone, etc. So this was a very interesting moment for me. And then, of course, next to connecting with people and experiencing some of the life in the village, of course, with your own background, so it's not the same than being a person from that community, but it's still very useful. Then you have all of this question of collecting images, sound, and also object, and all the ethical issues that surround the collection in field trip. So first you have the sound collection. So usually when we go into a village for a field trip, me and my colleague would go first to meet the head of the village. We explain who we are, what we are doing. We show, usually we have official documents. So we explain what we would like to do in the community, if it's all right to do it, that we would like to record and what we will do with the recording. And then we, of course, explain that also to the person we will record. But in some cases, you can't really prepare that and ask beforehand to the performer. Here, for example, this picture was taken during Hmong New Year in Luang Prabang. Hmong New Year is a huge festival in Luang Prabang. You have thousands of people meeting together. You have Hmong from all over Laos, also people from neighboring countries. You have foreigners joining. All the expats in Luang Prabang know about the event and like to join. It's very open to everyone. And over the years, I really learned how to spot also these little gathering of singers, because you have more formal performances on a stage, but you also have people singing usually courting song, love song, in a more informal ways all throughout the festival. And so at a certain point, I could really spot them easily. I knew when I see a gathering around 2 persons. And then, of course, when I arrive to record, I can't just tap on the shoulder of the singer and ask, hey, do you mind if I record? Of course, because the person is busy singing. So for that moment, and not to break the momentum, of course, I would approach and ask around if it was all right for me to record. So I asked to a few people that are near them. The other people are also Hmong. They understand exactly what the song is about. And of course, they were able to tell me if no, this is not a good thing to record because maybe the topic is too personal or quite specific and should not be shared. So then I would not record, of course. But most of the time it was really all right for me to record. So I would start recording and then at the end of the performance, I would introduce myself to the singers, explain who I am, why I recorded, if it's all right for me to keep the recording, and what I would do with the recordings. For example, put it into the museum library. Then now about the collection of the instrument. That is a very specific topic, but actually you can think about it also for, I would say, everyone joining this talk today. As a tourist, when you visit a village, for example, and you have the possibility to acquire objects, handicraft, these are questions that is important to ask yourself. So first of all, what is this object? Is it sacred? Does it have a special importance for the community? Does it mean something? Is it only used or worn by specific members of the community? So these should be a big red flag if it's the case for you not to acquire the objects. Is the object common or rare? Is it easy for it to be replicated? Is it easy to access the material to replicate the object and the knowledge to also make a new version of this object? So these are really important things to ask yourself. Also, why would you buy this object, acquire it? For example, in the case of a museum, you can ask yourself, is it an instrument that will be eventually played, or will it only be exhibited in a glass case in an exhibition or kept in the storage room? This is the same for collectors. Is it an object or an instrument or a tool that I will use, or that I will only put on the wall in my living room, for example? If you're not using the object, or if the instrument is not going to be played, of course, in our case, we would not ask to buy the best flute, for example, in the village, the one with the nicest sound, right? We want that one to stay in the community and be played by actual musicians. It doesn't mean that we have to buy broken instruments, because maybe in a few years, the instrument that we collected will be acoustically analyzed, for example. So it's important to have a working instrument, but it doesn't need to be the best one, for example. So asking yourself why you collect is also very important. I would also, of course, advise never to buy antiques. You don't know exactly for sure where they are coming from. They could be looted. They are old objects, so ideally they should not leave the community, even if people propose you to buy it. These are always objects that at best should stay within the community, and at worst should go then into a museum and not a private collection. In the case of TAEC and the music exhibition, for example, what we did was commissioning new instruments. It was a nice way for us, first of all, to make sure that the instruments were easily replicable and that we would not collect instruments that were starting to be scarce or rare into the village. It was a nice way for us to support the local instrument maker, give them a fair price for their work, and at the same time we would be able to document the crafting of the instrument, making videos, understanding all the different steps and documenting them, and also allow us to, as I say, leave the older instrument in the community. And this is very useful, and actually there is a very specific example with this very flute that you see here on the background, and it's the one I'm taking into a picture in the illustration here, is Hao Dong Nu. It is a flute that is played in the Yao Mien community. It's in Ban Jongka in the north of Laos. And we saw actually a picture of a musician with this instrument into a book of music of the region. So we knew it was from that village and we wanted to meet him. So we went to that community in which we worked also in the past on handicraft. And we asked to meet the musician because we wanted to document the instrument. And when we arrived to his house, we've been told that actually he was not there. He was not home. He was working in the field for at least a day. And it was not possible for us to meet him. So his wife was there. She was really nice. She showed us the instrument. I took pictures of the flutes. I took measurement of the instrument. We asked a few questions and we thought, Bopenyan, it's okay. We will come back in a few months anyway to do deeper research on the topic. And when we came back to the village a few months after, unfortunately, we realized that the flute player passed away a few weeks before we arrived, and he has been cremated with most of his flute. So only one flute, we've been told, was remaining in the village at that time. And to be honest, at that really moment, me and my colleague really asked ourselves, should we acquire this instrument for the museum? No one apparently can play the instrument in the community. An instrument that is not played will degrade really fast. Isn't it better for us to keep it in the museum so that more people will be able to see it? But we discussed, we also asked the question to a few members of the community and decided that it was really better to leave the instrument in the community. And really, musical practices, like everything else in societies, change. Some disappear because maybe they are not relevant anymore. Others appear. It's also a very normal thing. So here for us, it seemed that it was really more ethical to leave the instrument within the community and whatever will happen to it. And actually, a few months after this second field trip, we've been recontacted by a member of the community, this gentleman, his name is Yaoku Aiseten. He is a musician, but he's not traditionally playing that flute. But he told us that he was actually able to replicate the instrument. So he took the last flute and he copied it, and then he learned how to play it. So we were delighted to learn about that. And we asked him if he was able to replicate more so that we could have a few for TAEC collection, which he did. It was really great. We paid him for that. And then it was so nice for him to do more and more of these flute that we even asked him to make some so that we could sell them in the shop in TAEC. And so we went really from this flute that was virtually the last one into the village to a flute that you now can buy into TAEC shop. And so I think the agency of the community is really something that we underestimate a lot. And that people are not waiting for ethnomusicologists to come and save their culture. Of course, people are very active on their own and they know what is still relevant for the community. And the case of this Haodong Nu flute is a very nice one. And so you can see that really doing research in the field has sometimes an impact for sure on the community and on the researcher. In particular, that is something I noticed really is also the museum side of this research and this project in particular, the Voices of the Wind exhibition. When you see a very common object that you see every day in your life into the sacred space of a museum glass case, it really shed a different light on that object. And maybe then you would rediscover the value of that object. This is something I experienced myself. I remember really well. It was a few years back when I visited the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I saw this pair of scissors in a case in the MoMA, and I was completely shocked because I had the exactly same one at home. My mom had this pair of scissors, and now I was seeing it there in the museum in New York. And really, that made me thought about the fact that I never looked at this pair of scissors the same way again. And this is something that is so nice with museum, that it allows you to rediscover and rethink, reshapes the way you see heritage or common pieces of your everyday life. And this was also the case when we were doing field trip for the music exhibition. So for example, here, this is Mr. Bunam. I did work with him in Tai Dam already for my PhD. And then we went back into the village with TAEC to document this instrument for the music exhibition. This instrument is a free reed instrument with a buzzing hole. It has a very specific sound. And it's called a piluang, and it is used to accompany the healer for the Sen ceremony. That's a Tai Dam healing ceremony. We have a few videos of that on YouTube, on the TAEC YouTube channel. And after we spent several days recording Mr. Bunnam, interviewing him, and also we did film the different steps of the making of the instrument. One day his grandson picked up one of the instruments and started playing with it, and he was really trying to imitate his grandfather. And Mr. Bunnam told us that it was actually the first time his grandson was actively interested into the instrument, because we were there, and you see this outsider asking all of these questions to your grandfather about this little stick with holes that you saw all of your life, and then suddenly you think, yeah, maybe it's interesting actually. Something, although, that we really felt when we were into the community was this power imbalance, particularly with the music exhibition. We had the financial power, the human power, the technical power to go around dozens of communities in the north of Laos to record music, interview people, collect instruments. This is something that when we were discussing with our informant in the village, these people could never do. They don't have the time to go around and ask and meet other musicians. They don't have the financial possibilities of spending weeks outside of their village, and also they don't have the technical possibilities of recordings, going around with a car, etc. So that we felt that we wanted to somehow restore a little bit this imbalance, and this is why we made this project of repatriation of the collected data. So I will not develop the topic because it has been developed in several talks and articles, but basically we went back into the 8 main villages in which we worked for the music exhibition, and we brought back all the data that we collected. So we made a pop-up exhibition, we had instruments to try out, the kids really liked it, we screened video that we shot in the villages, we also gave away VCDs and SD card with every recording we made, all the interviews also, booklets with pictures and information from the field, and also all the pictures that we took, we gave them back to the community. So it was one way for us to really acknowledge and somehow restore a little bit this imbalance between the researcher and the community with who we work. And the last stories that I wanted to tell to finish this talk was one that happened in the south of Laos in Sekong province, where we worked with a Taliang and Katu community. So we had one interview with the 3 gentlemen. The one in the middle is the head of the village. His name is Mr. Savansak. And then you have on the left Mr. Ut, and then Mr. Boisai, who are ritual specialists in the Katu community in that village, Chalin village in Sekong province. We were interviewing them about the traditional outfit of the Katu. And Mr. Hood was really happy to show us and to model for us. So we asked, like, do you mind to try the outfit? And he actually really enjoyed it. He took poses, etc. He had a really nice time. And for us also, it was really nice to see how these outfits were traditionally worn. They are still woven today by hand of women in the village, but it's quite rare. They are hand woven on a backstrap loom, as you can see here on the picture. But they are not worn nowadays. They are only woven, at least in that village, for a funeral. So when the men of the village died, then they would be buried with these outfits. And actually, these 3 men told us that they were really happy and feeling really proud that we would ask questions about this outfit. And they explained that a few dozen of years ago, so when they were younger, they were really ashamed of these traditional outfits. They started being ashamed because other communities of the country would really look down at them and consider this outfit, in particular the loincloth, as, quote, uncivilized. And they really explained how much it hurted them. Even speaking their own language was for them a problem sometimes when they would leave the village and go to the district, for example, in town. They would feel ashamed of speaking their own language because it would show that they are, I quote, uncivilized, etc. And indeed, when I looked online on Gallica, I found these pictures that is from the end of the 19th century. It is not Katu men, I think. There are a population from the south of Laos, culturally close, but they're not exactly the same ethnic group. But just to show you here, the description of the pictures says, I quote, Laotian savages. So this is really also something that, of course, you had into the colonial discourse and description about some of the communities. You clearly had also hierarchy into the colonial discourse in the communities of Laos. And what is quite interesting, after I had this conversation with these three men, I really remembered it, because I was quite shocked and also happy that they said they were glad that we asked all of these questions. And then a few years after this conversation, I found this picture on the internet. It's a picture of Mr. Global 2019. It is a men beauty pageant, and this is the representative of Laos. And this handsome young man is wearing an outfit that is clearly a mix of different communities of Laos, and also different times, historical outfits. So it is a mix of style in terms of period of time and also ethnic groups. But you can see that many of the items are actually, in particular in the loincloth, the jewelry also, are really inspired by what communities of the South are wearing. And although still it is not a picture that represent the Laotian men in the very large term, because here you have a certain image of the man, a man that is viril, a warrior, maybe a little bit wild, with, you see they added the feathers on the arm. So this is a certain representation of masculinity, yes, but still it is really interesting to think that a few dozen of years back, Katu men were really ashamed to wear the loincloth, and they didn't really want to talk about it in the past. And now you have this interesting melting pot of style to represent the virility of young Lao men into a beauty pageant. So I will stop my talk here. I hope you enjoy it. We have about, I think, 20 minutes or a little bit less for questions. So these were really reflections and food for thought that I got from all of this field trip. I would be really happy to discuss them with you and answer a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Pierre. We actually officially only have about 7 minutes left, but we can go over time if we need to. But we actually only have at the moment one question that has been posted, and I mean others may come up or people may have others. Please feel free, anyone, to post any questions you might have in the chat. So the question that has been written here is, how were you able to truly record the experiences as you were separated by your status as a special guest? You might experience things differently and experience the heart and the feelings of the people, is the question.
Thank you. So that's a very interesting question. I did not record the actual experiences, of course, because as you say, I am an outsider. I am also a foreigner, so there are a lot of differences. And as an anthropologist or as an ethnomusicologist, as a researcher, you arrive on the field with all of your background. Also as a person, me or my brother would live a very different field trip, even if we have the same background. So this is something we have to think about, of course, and this is a bias that we all have to keep in mind and think about when we do field trip. So I did not record the experience or the life of, let's say, a Tai Dam singer for my PhD. I did the research according to my perception of things. Of course, I was trying to have a reflexivity on this bias. For example, I know that when I started research in Laos, I was in my master's degree, and I had a very musicologist approach. I had very clear and useless questions that were really related to my musicology background. And I understood really fast that they had no point to ask this very theoretical question, because people were not experiencing music that way at all in the community. So you have to think about it yourself and do the research taking into consideration the fact that, yes, you're not from that community. But think about it, when you also do anthropology at home, you also are biased. If I do anthropology of my own family, then it's different. I don't have this bias of being an outsider, but I have the bias of knowing really well my mom, understanding, I don't know, her deeper psychology, her history, why she's acting like this or like that. So this is also a bias. I would say that actually the ideal is to have two people, someone who is external to the community and someone who is in the community, and having like really the merging of these reflection and research together. In my opinion, that's really good because both approaches are really useful.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful, and also recognizing that those biases come in. I mean, no matter who you are and in what perspective you're or whatever role you're playing. I guess one question that I have just linked to what you just mentioned was, did you have community resource persons or community translators that you used through your research that played a bit of this role of giving you the insider's perspective and being able to discuss with you a bit more the research that you were undertaking?
Yes, so it depends also really on which research trip. But for example, for my PhD, my interpreter was a teacher from Dong Dok University, and he was Tai Dam. So he was Tai Dam from that region in particular, which was really great because also from a village to another in the Tai Dam community, you had really different accents. Some village I could understand a lot, some village I could understand nothing. And they were speaking the same language, but with different accents. So I also did some research in his village, which was really useful. But again, it is very nice. For example, working in your interpreter's village, but there are also a lot of bias, right? Because he knows people in the village, maybe he will introduce you, which is very natural and human, to his friends, his family, etc. So you will be also, again, led to specific people in the village. So everything is a bias. It's normal. I mean, we are all human and we all have affinities, or you can't be neutral. You're not a robot or a computer, and even a computer doing research survey, then it would not be participative observation. So just again, even when you work with an interpreter and with people that are inside the community, you have to think about the positive and less positive side of it, and being aware of that. I mean, it will not prevent you to work with people, obviously, but being aware of that. If you work with a woman and a man, it's completely different also. Young women have more access to other women. It's more difficult if you are only men and you want to discuss with women topic. People will tell you things, but they will avoid discussing a lot of different topics also that you will never know existed because you're from another gender, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the gender bias is probably one of the more obvious, but age as well, being an outsider and insider in terms of nationality, language, but there's a lot of other more subtle kind of, differences as well. So related to this question is now, did you find that people guided you towards documentation of specific songs or practices, either in terms of what they wanted to be shared and disseminated, or wanted to keep secret? So it could also kind of be like, I know that we've had this discussion with ourselves before, what are people proud of? And is that really what we're interested in? Yeah. And what is it that they think they should be sharing with the world? And is that, are we playing along with that, or are we questioning that a little bit?
Yeah, so exactly that's what you say. There is these two sides, right? The one side is what as a researcher you expect at first to find in the village, and then of course you realize it's completely different, but you have specific expectation, or you did a plan for your research. I want to study the traditional singing of Tai Dam. But then you also have, and you have to take that into consideration. What do people want to show? For example, for an exhibition, that is really different. And for us, it was nice. For the exhibition, we went with what people would show us. We had a list of instruments. It was specific. It was wind instrument. But then we were happy to go with any wind instrument because it was not an in-depth research on one community. It was to show the diversity of wind instrument. It was important for us to have the community having their word to say and what they want to show. But other research, like my PhD, it was deeper into one topic. And I know that, for example, I had a lot of political singing that people wanted to show, not only because they were political, but also because they were new. They were more the proudest of, and the fact that when you spend more time in the community, then also you realize that there are other repertoire maybe that are less shared with you at first, and then when people know you better, then they share it more. And I also know that there are things that it was impossible to have information about, for example, the healing ceremonies or some magical power that the singer are using to be inspired. I was always interested by that because I knew it existed. Some people spoke about it, like some magical formula that people say whisper in a glass, and then they drink the glass and it gives them inspiration. I always wanted to speak about it because I thought it was really interesting, but I could tell that people were completely avoiding the answer, and this is something you also have to respect, right? You can't just like force people to share things they don't want to for some reason some reason or the other, but it's you have to respect that. It's normal.
Thank you. And I think a last question then, before things are, oh, actually there's a couple of questions. Well, one, maybe a quick one is, do you know whether there's a digital archive of traditional Hmong songs? I often travel to see a Hmong community in North Vietnam, and the youth there are keen to learn and preserve traditional songs. I mean, one thing I guess I would say is Facebook has a lot and YouTube has a lot, right?
Hmong are really active on social media. We also have a little bit at TAEC. There is also the Archive of Traditional Music of Laos that was made by Giza Yanniken. She's in this school also in Vientiane, in the National Library. They have, I'm not sure they have Hmong, but I suppose they have Hmong recordings. But for the Hmong, it's a really active community, and you have a lot of people who did really deep research on the community also in Vietnam and in Laos. Yeah.
And then the last question I was going to ask is from Yukino San, who we know has curated an exhibition at TAC before. And she said, when I visited Tailu with you, Marie-Pierre, I found your ability as a music player, musician yourself, as quite important to communicate with the players in the village. What do you think of this particular point? She respected your respect to the village musicians themselves. So I guess how your role as also being someone who is a musician, how was that able to play a role in your research?
Thank you, Kino-san. So I think it played a role more in what I explained in this talk, like experiencing things, because I am not a professional musician, and the people with who I work are not professional musicians. I was already had discussion about that with other ethnomusicologists, and I realized that being a musician yourself is particularly useful when you work with other professional musicians, people that do this as a job. Of course, here in the village, it was nice if I could perform some music, especially singing, actually. But the best was for me to sing some local songs. If I was singing foreign songs or playing the flute, in general, people were really wondering, like, what is this instrument? The sound is so strange, etc. So they were not really focusing on the musical aspect of it, I would say. So it helped me really to experience things and understand some element, but again, with my background, so not everything, but some of the element for the musician. But to connect, it's one way, but you can have many other ways. Like, as I say, it's a funny story, but drinking alcohol was a really good way to connect with people, and I would say even more than playing music in some cases. So, but again, it's like mastering somehow the etiquette, or if you master an instrument or a little bit of singing, it is very nice, but you can also be more within the community by mastering other social and cultural elements, your own way, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I think we'll bring this to a close. I did want to mention, I've just dropped in TAC's website, and particularly our SoundCloud and YouTube has recordings from the research that Marie-Pierre did with our team, as well as some videos on crafting of particular instruments, the playing of instruments, that sort of thing. So that might be interesting for people to explore as well. Thank you all very much for joining. Thanks to you, Marie-Pierre, for taking the time to put together this talk and joining us again from Qatar. The link to this talk will be sent out by email in the next couple of days. And then within a few weeks after that, we'll also be putting it on YouTube so it can be shared. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Marie. Bye.